Hey there, guys. So I want to thank you for taking the time to check out today's live stream, of course. So what we're going to be going over today is on your protein target matters less if you can't repeat it. But before I do get started, I do want to share a few things with you guys. So again, if you're not aware, I do have a website which is bponlinefitness.com. I always have a ton of information on there that you can check out related to online fitness coaching, as well as getting access to some of the free resources that I have on there. I have an email newsletter that I send out each and every Monday, and then I also have a blog that I upload and, or I should say, update every single Friday that you can check out. So definitely make use of those resources. Again, that's free for you to access and to make use of. Another thing too, I do have usually the latest live stream is on the homepage of my website that you can watch. So definitely check that out if that's something that you're interested in. I usually, again, do these streams every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time here on Facebook. And then I'll also do other streams throughout the week. So every Tuesday, I do a stream on TikTok at the same time that I'm doing today. And then on Thursday, I do a stream on YouTube every other Thursday. So definitely check those out if that's something that you're interested in. All of these topics that I discuss on each of these platforms are unique and they're not the same as, another platform. I try to make it to where all of these topics are unique again and it's not repetitive and that you're not hearing the same thing over and over again. So I always try to change things up on each of these platforms. But again, guys, I really do appreciate your time. I really hope that you find this helpful and valuable and that this will give you some insight, especially on the nutrition side of things. So let's go ahead and get started with this topic. Again, we're going over protein and really understanding why your protein target matters less if you can't repeat it. So there's a few different points that we're going to be going over here today. And really the main emphasis that we're going to be going over is how to build more of a structured sort of protein strategy rather than constantly trying to create this target. So we're going to go over the perfect protein number isn't the real goal. Build a nutrition, or excuse me, a protein floor before you chase the ceiling. Make protein automatic in most of your repeatable meals. Stop saving most of your protein for dinner. Create a protein strategy for your worst days and not just your best days. Use protein ranges instead of turning one number into a pass or a fail. Your environment can also make protein consistency easier and measure protein consistency across weeks and not just individual days. So again, that's going to be basically the different points that we're going to be sort of discussing today. And again, to, sort of as an introductory, sort of basically introduction to this topic, I guess I should say in particular, is that this is really going to be discussing on how to have a protein plan that is not specifically focused on the numbers themselves, but on really creating a more sustainable way to get your protein intake throughout the day rather than relying solely on the numbers. So, the perfect protein number isn't the real goal. So your protein target is only going to work if your daily habits make it achievable. So the reason why I'm talking about protein in particular is usually protein is the most important part of really nutrition, not only when we're talking about muscle gain. Of course, muscle gain is the big factor into really helping with the muscle repair and the recovery, but it can also have a great benefit to a fat loss routine at the same time. And one of those reasons is that protein can be more, more satiating when you have more of it in your diet. So it can sort of curb your appetite in that way. So again, so this can really benefit anybody, really no matter what your goal is. So stop obsessing over exact grams. So being a few grams above or below your target is not going to determine your results. It's really more so about you getting as close to those numbers as you can. It's not about obsessing over those numbers, but just getting within that range. Prioritize consistency. So, regularly getting adequate protein matters more than having those occasional perfect days. You don't need to have, you don't need to over obsess on your nutrition. You just need to make sure that you're kind of being in that proper range. So, build protein into your routine. Anchor your most predictable meals around dependable protein sources. I've mentioned this before in a previous stream, but this is the main thing you want to think about as far as your meals is that when you focus on anchoring your protein, and what that means is basically using your protein as the first thing that you build your meals around. So let's say your protein source is grilled chicken, then build, extra foods around that, whether that be vegetables, rice, brown rice, quinoa. Learn to focus on finding your protein source that you want to have for that meal and then build around that. And that's basically what I mean by anchoring protein as sort of the main, part of the meal, in other words. Think beyond ideal days. So your strategy should still work during busy work days, travel weekends, and schedule changes. Like what I've mentioned many times before, the way that we can really reach our goal is to be able to adapt to anything that happens in our lives. Our goals, especially when it comes to nutrition, even with workouts, the way that we can really get results and have those results sustainable is learning to adapt as life changes and makes sudden shifts. Naturally, life is going to do that here and there. You're probably going to have a time frame where everything is just as your normal routine, and then things suddenly change. You have to learn to adapt when those changes happen. You have to build a routine that is going to allow you to really adjust to those changes. And again, this is not only for nutrition, but this is for workouts themselves. A lot of people feel that everything has to be in the perfect spot in order to start making these changes. But you're never really going to be in that perfect spot. Life is going to constantly shift and change. You just have to be willing to learn to adapt to those obstacles that are coming your way. So, again, building your nutrition in a sustainable way comes with thinking ahead, thinking of how can I make this sustainable if life suddenly changes, if, my routine changes, what can I do to be able to adapt and adjust to that? So again, create a sustainable range. So a practical target range can provide structure without turning nutrition into a pass or fail test. So when it comes to the protein range that you want to think about, normally with protein intake, especially like, when we're talking about muscle gain in particular, normally our protein intake needs to roughly match our body weight. So I've mentioned this many times before, but I still think it's important to mention because this is a good indicator on where your protein intake should be. So again, like for example, if you are 150 pounds and you're wanting to focus on, muscle gain in particular, your protein intake needs to sort of match that weight, if that makes sense. So you're basically wanting to get at least a little bit over 150 grams of protein each day, and then, of course, adjusting that as your body weight changes. So that's really the proper guideline that you want to think about for your protein intake. It's very simple to keep in mind. And again, this changes depending on what your goals are. Now, what I mentioned there with your protein intake, that's mainly being in a, you know, more of a calorie surplus because it's muscle gain. Now, if you're focusing on fat loss, it's a little bit different where you're still sort of staying within that range, but you're not really focusing on going well above that range. You're going to be getting your intake a little bit slightly lower because generally with fat loss, you're in a calorie deficit, so you're consuming less calories, versus when we're focusing on muscle gain, you're in a higher calorie range, and that's more of a surplus. So I don't want to confuse you too much, but generally the guideline is that you want to focus on being getting your protein intake around your body weight itself. So the next point we're going to go over is building a protein floor before you chase the ceiling. So constantly pushing harder may feel productive, but sustainable fitness requires periods where the goal shifts from doing more to maintaining what you've built. And this is, of course, in line with not only nutrition, but workouts themselves. A lot of these things that I'm sort of touching on can kind of align both ways. So fatigue eventually catches up. So continually increasing your training volume intensity or dieting demands can create physical and mental fatigue. So recovery has limits. So your muscles, joints, and nervous system and overall energy need opportunities to recover from these demanding phases. So more effort doesn't always mean more progress. So eventually pushing harder can produce diminishing returns while making workouts feel increasingly difficult. So again, when we're talking about the concept of nutrition, just because you increase your intake as far as your protein more does not mean it's going to maximize your results that much. You just need to focus on staying within that range. It's not going to give you even more results if you're increasing it so much. So you have to think about it in that context as well. So maintenance itself protects your foundation. So holding steady allows you to preserve strength, muscle routines, and nutrition habits without constantly demanding improvement. So sometimes here and there, there's going to be moments where you just want to maintain where you're at and not really focus on constantly increasing. You kind of want to have a balance between sort of a maintenance phase and then, sort of letting your body rest and adjust, and then making an increase in your intensity, whether that be workouts, increase in your nutrition, things of that nature. So you really want to have a balance and not constantly be focusing on, continuously improving, but sort of like an ebb and flow between sort of that maintenance phase and your increase in sort of your nutrition itself. Make protein automatic in your most repeatable meals. So the easier protein fits into your normal routine, the less you have to rely on motivation and perfect planning. So how to make protein more automatic. So identify your most predictable meals and start with your meals you rarely skip, such as breakfast, lunch, or your post-workout meal. So focus on getting most of your protein intake within those particular meals. Like with me, usually I always get the most out of my intake, usually both with breakfast and dinner. That's usually where a lot of, my protein comes from. But you still at the same time, again, want to spread out your intake throughout the day. Again, create a protein anchor. So choose the protein source first, then build carbohydrates, fats, fruits, and vegetables around that meal, whatever your meal is. Develop 2 to 3 default meals. So keep several reliable high protein meals you enjoy and prepare without much of a thought. So this is really important too, where you're going to be able to be sustainable is making things more automatic. The more that you get rid of sort of the decision making in your routine, the more you are going to allow for, these things to just happen. It gets rid of that fatigue and the decisions, and you just automatically, okay, this is what I'm going to eat each of these days. It just gets rid of that decision making and a lot of wasted time in between. So repeat the structure, not necessarily the food. So use a consistent meal formula while rotating your protein sources and other ingredients for variety. So you don't necessarily have to stay in the same particular meals every single day. You can always change it up. Like for example, maybe one day you're using, grilled chicken as a protein source, and maybe you're using brown rice and vegetables alongside of it. And then maybe one other day you want to change up your protein source, whether that be, like salmon or any other type of lean meat. You can change it up in any way that you like. If you wanted to do like steak, for example, like you could still have that, staying within your nutrition without it being boring as you are, preparing each meal. And again, it doesn't have to be repetitive. You just have to kind of keep the same formula for each of your meals. Keep your staples available, so make frequently used protein foods part of your regular grocery list. Have a backup option. Keep convenient protein choices available for days when your normal meal doesn't happen. So again, this goes back into adapting into, when life sort of happens and when you're not able to sort of stay within your normal routine, try to have those other sources available, or it makes it easier to go to those to use to help get your protein intake where it needs to be. So stop saving most of your protein for dinner. Again, like what I just mentioned before, your protein intake should be mostly focused on being spread throughout each of your major meals throughout the day. So, why this matters is that eating plenty of protein at dinner is great, but your muscles benefit when protein is available consistently throughout the day. So instead of trying to catch up at night, build protein into meals and snacks from morning to evening. So start earlier. Make breakfast your first meaningful protein opportunity. Like what I mentioned, this is what I usually do in my routine. Build every meal around protein again. Choose your protein source before adding carbs, fats, and sides. Distribute your intake, so aim for several protein rich foods rather than one huge serving at dinner or any other particular meal. You don't want to just have a large protein meal and not get other, protein sources throughout the day. Support recovery all day, so regular protein intake is going to provide amino acids your body can use for muscle repair and growth. Make dinner easier when you already accumulated protein throughout the day. Dinner doesn't have to carry your entire target, so you can sort of lower your intake. If you're really close to your goal, there's no need to keep that protein intake really high if you've already sort of reached that max for your goal. Prioritize consistency. So a repeatable protein rhythm is more valuable again than occasionally hitting the perfect distribution in your protein. It's more about getting within that range that matters most. So create a protein strategy for your worst days, not just your best days. So your nutrition plan should still work when life doesn't. So again, establish a protein floor. So decide on a realistic minimal protein intake you can achieve even on your busiest and most stressful days. Like what I mentioned, a good guideline with protein is having it match your body weight. So if you can get as close to, again, like what I said with 150 pounds, if you can get at least roughly, as close as you can to that 150 grams of protein intake for the entire day, you're going to be fine. Even if you go just a few grams below that, if you went to like 130, 140, that's totally fine. And what matters is that you're getting closer to that range that you need to be in. Keep backup options available. Protein shakes, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, tuna packets, jerky, eggs, or other convenient options can prevent an imperfect day from becoming an unstructured one. So try to find those ways where you can sort of fill in any of those gaps in your intake. Build around your most reliable meals, so identify the meals you rarely skip and make the most of those, or you can make protein automatic within them. Reduce your decisions when you're busy, so have 2 to 3 simple high protein meals you can prepare or purchase without much thought. So, this is another thing that's helpful. Really, again, what we're trying to focus on here is getting rid of the decision making and learning to adapt, having those other options available, while at the same time, our existing meals, making them to where they're automatic and we can just prepare them as quickly as possible. So use protein ranges again instead of turning one number into a pass or fail. It's like what I just previously mentioned. If you can get as close as you can in your range, that's what matters. So protein consistency doesn't require hitting the exact same number every day. So replace the bullseye with a target zone. So instead of believing you must hit exactly like what I mentioned, 150 grams, for example, create a reasonable range such as 140 to 160 grams that still supports your overall goal. So again, even if you're going slightly below that or slightly above that, that doesn't mean it necessarily is affecting your goal completely. It's about being within that range. So avoid the I already failed mentality. So coming up to 10 grams short doesn't erase an otherwise productive day of eating. Nutrition progress isn't necessarily about passing or failing. So let your intake flex with your schedule. So appetite, meal timing, training, traveling, and busy days are going to naturally change. A range gives you flexibility without completely eliminating that structure. Focus on your weekly pattern. So one slightly lower protein day is going to matter much less than what you're constantly accomplishing across a week and months. So keeping this pattern going and consistent is going to matter more again than trying to have those perfect days every single day. It does not have to be perfect. It just needs to be within that ideal range that is getting you towards your goal. So your environment can make protein consistency easier. So this is a few other points to really keep in mind that can, again, make this process a little bit easier to stay focused on and keep a track of. So keep protein visible and accessible. Stock easy options where you can see and reach them. Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, eggs, ready to drink shakes, tuna packets, and pre-cooked meals. So again, you can meal prep, you could again choose those really quick snack options that can help you, or if you're kind of behind in your intake, you can add those. Build your grocery list around protein. Choose your primary protein sources first again, and then build those meals as well as your snacks around those. Prepare for busy moments. Keep convenient protein options at work, in your gym bag, or wherever appropriate, so a hectic schedule doesn't automatically mean skipping that protein intake. Again, remove the unnecessary decisions. Have those 2 to 3 reliable breakfasts, lunches, and snacks, or as well as dinner, that already contain a meaningful amount of protein. So still try to focus on, again, keeping those reliable meals while at the same time when you're behind, you also have those extra options that'll help you get your intake to where it needs to be. Measure protein consistency across weeks and not individual days. So again, the same point applies here is that we're focusing on replacing the target zone and quit relying on the, already failed mentality, really focusing on making it an emphasis that we, again, are just staying within the proper range and that it's not about getting to that perfect sort of set, target, but again, and this can apply, even though I've mentioned protein a lot, this can still apply with a lot of our other nutrients. Usually, carbs and fats sort of have the same concept. They are slightly different. I'm not going to go into detail with those 2 points, but I may really dive into how those are combined with protein and how you can, again, make the most of those. And the reason why I'm mentioning protein, carbs, and fats, of course, in particular, is they are your macronutrients. So those nutrients you are going to get in a large amount, and those are the nutrients that are really going to help you with getting your results. They matter the most. You really need to focus on those as much as possible so that you are getting to your goal in an efficient way. So with carbs, it is basically you're again doing that same sort of range where you're sort of having those 3 to 5 grams, based on, again, it's slightly different and it does kind of range in a different way, but you are sort of basing it a little bit off your body weight, but you're adjusting. And fats are sort of the same, where is it's a little bit less, where it's like 0.7 to 1 gram of fat per body weight. But again, it's something that I would have to really give you guys a clear picture so it's not confusing on how it works. But again, I think protein is the easiest way to understand because you're just matching what your body weight is to the amount of grams that you should get per day. And then you're just adjusting that as you're tracking your weight. So as your weight goes up, your range is going to naturally go up. So that's how you sort of determine, okay, do I need to change it? And your weight is sort of going to determine that. But keep in mind, it doesn't necessarily have to completely reach 150 grams. It can still be slightly lower, can still be slightly above. But again, you're just basing that off your particular body weight. So thank you guys for watching once again. I really hope that this was helpful and valuable. I hope that this gave you a little bit of insight and that it helped you a little bit to understand how protein works and how to better track it and to have it align with your goal. Again, like I said, I think protein is very simple. It's just the hardest part, I think, with it is the consistency and really learning how to spread it out through your meals. I think that's probably the hardest part with it. But once you start to, again, get a track of how, you know, like already having a list of what you need, learning to track your meals, when you start to get adjusted to these small little habits, you'll get to your intake more consistently. And I think meal tracking is what really will benefit you, especially with this and trying to reach your goal. But with all that being said, guys, I really appreciate your time. I really, again, hope this was helpful. If you do have any questions about anything I discussed, feel free to let me know. You can reach out to me through, of course, email. I do have an email address, which is brendanparton95 at Gmail. And then I also have, of course, my website, which is bponlinefitness.com. So if you do want to check out what I do have to offer related to online fitness coaching, definitely check that out. There's a ton of information on there that you can make use of. This live stream will, of course, be archived and it will be available on YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube. But I really appreciate you guys and your time. If there's anything, any other topic you would like me to discuss in a future stream, feel free to let me know. The reason why I did discuss this particular topic was I know somebody had mentioned about protein. And so I decided to, originally I had a different topic planned for the stream, but I decided to change it because I know there was a few people mentioning protein intake. So that was the reason why I did this discussion. So anytime there's any topic you guys would like me to discuss, I'm willing to do that. And again, really dive deeper into some of these topics so that you have a better understanding. But with all that being said, guys, I really appreciate your time. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But I will see you guys in the next live stream next Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So thank you guys once again for watching.